If you're someone that's starting and it's January and here we are ready to start some new health goals, your roots might be a little bit shallow, and that is okay. It's new and we're just so happy the seed's planted. But to remember that over time, those get deeper and those get stronger, right?
Happy January. This is your friend Lizzy, and we're digging into a new series this month to help you reach your goals. This month, we're going to visit the most common goals set each year, but hit them in a fresh light. We're going to debunk the most common myths and set you up for success, not only to reach your goals, but to become a better version of you. Because there's only one you, and the world needs it. Today, we're hitting the top New Year's resolution of health. I brought on my friend Tanna Fox, who is a certified nutritionist and the founder of Live Right Nutrition, who helps clients improve digestion, metabolism, and overall health through a holistic approach. With certifications in gut health, sports nutrition, and wellness coaching, my conversation with Tanna is going to blow your mind about how we see food and our bodies. Tanna is going to show you how deeply tied our bodies are to our spirituality, often in ways we overlook due to misunderstanding values and cultural stereotypes. She will help you see the symbolism and truth in honoring your physical health as an act of spiritual alignment. Outside of her work, Tanna stays active with yoga, skiing, and mountain biking, and cherishes time with her husband and 4 daughters. Tanna, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here.
You have blown me away. It's January when your episode launches. We are debunking myths on the most common goals this month.
Love it.
You are actually the reason why I've taken the approach to this entire month, to be honest.
Oh my gosh.
I don't think I would have thought it was possible. Nutrition has been a big part of my life. Exercise has been a huge part of my life. Health, all the things, is a big part of my family culture. And then you spoke about it at a friend's house. And I was like, this is what was missing. This is the purpose behind it all. And you put it in the right context. And so when I thought about January context, the whole month, I was like, well, let's debunk all of the goals that we set. But I only know I'm going to have Tanna there, so we'll start with her.
Oh, you're so nice. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, so let's talk about, before we jump into nutrition.
Yeah.
And you even talked about this before. A lot of people are like, well, just give me the food plan. Give me a meal plan and tell me how to change my weight. And we're not going to start there. Everyone listening in, for a really important reason. What would you say the reason is?
I think the reason is because this journey of health and wellness is not just a size. It's not a number. We oftentimes fixate on that because of what's going on in our Instagram feed, what past things have been done in our life, right? The way we used to watch someone get healthy, if you will. But one of the reasons why I am so in love with nutrition and fitness, for that matter, is because there's layers and there's so much more depth to access than we even begin to realize. It really is about more. It's about becoming the same way we're on these quests in our life, right? To become wiser, to become more patient, to become more kind, right? Whatever they are, sometimes we forget that our health really is a key part of reaching those kinds of goals.
So bodies are so much more than a number, obviously.
So much more than a number.
And even if you've heard that, now we're going to tell you why. Actually, I'm not. Tanna is.
No,
let's talk about bodies though. The connection between our bodies and our spirits and who we really are. And why does it matter more than a number? Because to the world, as long as the number's right, you're right.
You're right. And I have a secret. If you're not happy at a size 16, you will not be happy at a size 2. I've seen it. There's always something more that someone thinks and expects when they start a health journey. But when they don't realize that health is this journey of becoming and actually understanding your body, gaining a relationship with your body, you don't ever tap into how amazing it can be. And so I think one of the things I've been, as you go down a career path and you start to do more with work and you follow your passions, one of the things that stood out to me more than ever before, especially this last few years, is to help people understand that your body is more than just, again, this number, this size. Yes, it will move us, it will drive us, it will help us prepare dinners, but your body is actually given to us and has the ability to create and hold more light. That really is the purpose, I think, of taking care of your body. Because when you actually learn and understand all of these beautiful principles about health and wellness, it all ties back to being able to have an abundance, right? To have more of something for the most part, more energy, more, a better digestion, right? Whatever it is. But sometimes I think we become so fixated on that we forget that all of those exact little mores, little more this, little more this, little more this, actually really are tied to the biggest thing that we want the more of all, and that is light. And light in a way that illuminates our path, our mind, our physical strength, right? Our spiritual strength, our intellectual strength, our emotional and mental strength. That all becomes it becomes easier to access when you have a physical body that can hold and maintain light. And I don't know if that made sense, but it's just something that I've been working on and praying about and trying to understand how I can teach that principle better.
This morning we always do little family devotionals with our kids in the morning.
Love that.
And we were talking about that we were created for joy, which I think joy and light are really synonymous. And I held up the container of milk in my hand and I was like, what was this container created for? And it took them a second. They weren't sure what I was going on. But I was like, someone made this to perfectly hold milk. Yeah. Like the size it is fits perfectly in a refrigerator, how the top comes off, even the fact that it holds at the right temperature. Yeah. That's what it was made for. Our bodies are made for joy.
Oh my gosh,
for light.
Lizzy.
And like, we all kind of sat there and I think they kind of understood, but to be honest, I don't totally understand what that means.
Yeah.
I just know it's true.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a physical body.
So true.
And so when you think about the fixation on the body itself, if it's not with that underlying purpose, if it's not to hold more joy and more light, and actually if the food practices that I have or the exercise practices that I have lead me to less light and less joy
and more stress,
more disconnection from my body because I hate it, then I can't carry light.
It's so true.
I can't do anything with it.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the ultimate goal. That's the key to longevity. That's the key to that happiness. That's the key to understanding and deepening relationships with people and with divinity, right? Is our capacity to hold, share, gather, spread light. And so I think that's what, again, I just love so much about this. And that's why I love food and the colors and when it's grown by the sun and all those kinds of things, because it all comes back to light.
So beautiful and exciting. And the practical application, I think, is going to blow everyone's minds. Well, the things that I've heard of like, wait, how do you do that then?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what else do you want to teach us that's not nutrition related? We're going to get to some of the things that go in your body and how you care for your body.
Thanks for asking that question because it's kind of a unique opportunity to be able to share that because oftentimes we do think it has to be done. Here's a menu, here's a plan, here's a little guide, right? But I think one of the first things to understand is that when we learn a new concept in our life, whether it's, and I think one of my favorite ones is anytime I'm studying something about the gospel, right? I'm studying something about patience or mercy or grace or whatever the concept is, there is always, Lizzy, there is always a correlation to our physical bodies. And I think the thing that I love the most about that is that there is something spiritual that actually always translate to the temporal, right? And vice versa. There's what I'm trying to say is that everything that is temporal always translate to the spiritual. Our body is spiritual. Our body is temporal. Our spirits are spiritual. Our spirits are also, in a sense, temporal because you have to care for them. So there's this back and forth trying to understand nothing ever by itself is just temporal. They really do always tie back to this spiritual development. So I love taking these principles, and that was a really messy way of trying to say that when we're growing our spirits, taking those exact principles of, again, whatever it is, grace or patience, they can be practiced in the exact same way spiritually and then also flipped and practiced the exact same way temporally. So I'm trying to say that without an example, which I probably should just dive into some examples. But I think that is where we shortchange ourselves when we're trying to physically change our body, is we think that they have to be physical tactics, they have to be physical methods, but really they're actually the spiritual ones that will work for our physical body. So I don't know. I think
Ooh, I love that.
I don't know if that made any sense.
It made total sense. Let's get into some examples of how you would apply the spiritual change to the physical body.
Okay. Well, I just love this. I think one of the very first things overarching is to start to visualize your health like a tree. And I've told this story before. You've heard this before. And I'm sure many of you that know me might know this story. But I just will never forget a decade or so ago when I was starting to dive into my own nutrition business and just really trying to cultivate, what do I stand for and what's going to bring change for people? This was not to start out to be like, okay, let me see how many people I can, make thinner and who can I connect with? It really was about sharing a message. It was about bearing my testimony in a different way, right? Like kind of being a missionary in my own little way as a mom at home and still being able to connect with people. So as I'm going down this journey, one of the things that really started to click for me was when I was in this yoga class and we started doing a balance pose at the end of class. And there was this tree pose. So we're trying to hold this tree pose. And the teacher in the end of class starts telling everybody that's falling over, you've got a root to rise. Everybody, you're falling over, ground down your heel, spread out your toes, and really sink down into the earth and let that grounding help raise you. And so I'm carrying that with me for many, many weeks, this thought of root to rise, root to rise. Simultaneously, I'm also in my kitchen brewing up kefir and experimenting with, some different protein powders. And everyone, my mom is so cute. And she's like, okay, Tan, what are you doing with this milk on your counter? And we'll talk about kefir in a minute, but it's this probiotic milk. And I'm just experimenting with it. But people, again, are asking me, what is this milk? Is this going to make me skinny? And all of a sudden, I was like, I've got to figure out how to teach this. And that root to rise concept came back into my mind. And I was like, oh, we're actually going to start with the inside. So this kefir is going to help you internally, ground down and really rise. So then I started thinking, oh my goodness, there's so much symbolism in the tree and in this method of probiotics and all these kinds of things. So to kind of back up a little bit, if I was going to bring a visual and I was like, oh, this is a podcast, no one's going to be able to see it, but I wanted to paint a visual for everybody of a tree in their mind, right? And if you picture a tree, maybe kind of outside of the earth so you can see the roots, and you'll see how the roots kind of go down into the earth and they twist and they tangle, and sometimes they get intertwined with other roots, but they all have deep roots. And then there's the trunk, and the trunk rises up and it's sturdy and it's strong and it's different textures. Sometimes they're wide and sometimes they're smooth and sometimes they're rough, right? And then as you keep climbing up the tree visually with your eyes, you start to see the branches. And the branches are really actually what absorb the light and actually what allow the tree to keep reaching higher and higher. But I started to break this tree down into 3 different principles. The roots are the internal health, the trunk is the external health, and then the branches are this higher health, right? I was trying to think of some cute ways to name them, and I was like, I'll just go with the simple matters. But as we start to kind of physically name what are some of these roots, you can start to think of visually those roots. If we labeled some of those individual roots that are coming off the big trunk, they would be things like your heart and your lungs and your digestive tract, right? And the probiotics that you would put inside your body. They're all the things inside your body that nobody sees. But actually, those roots and what's inside determine how healthy we really are. If there were a storm to come, right? And the wind was blowing outside, the trees don't fall over based off of how strong their roots are. And that's how we are as well too. When we have our own storms, whether they're emotional, financial, physical, sometimes our own health, right? Disease comes through, sickness. We don't fall over based off of how strong our roots are. And so I love this concept of like how deep your roots grow is really truly how well we're able to stand. And again, that's another spiritual principle as well that I just love. Like, how well do we ground down and anchor into the truth? How well do we anchor into principles of strength and knowledge and things that will actually help us, withstand the storms.
Mm-hmm. Things that last forever.
Yes.
Things that are really truth.
Yes.
That you can count on for generations after generation after generation.
They don't change, and they will last for hundreds and hundreds of years. I mean, we went to the Redwood Forest a couple summers ago, and I was like, these trees have been around for thousands of years, and they just get bigger, and they're there, and they have a presence, and they have an energy because they've been practicing that for so long. And I was like, I think our bodies also want that same structure. They want that same beautiful, profound influence, right? That we can feel when we're in a forest. I think we also as humans can share that same kind of an influence when we're around other people. So that's one of the ones internally that I love to talk about.
So probiotics.
And yes, if we had to apply that exactly to us in a literal sense, what's one of the first things I thought, okay, let's simplify this rather than talk about all the different roots. If there was one that I had to tell your listeners, okay, what's one thing to really internally take away to ground down in your roots, it would be this introduction to probiotics. And some people are really familiar with them, right? Some people are like, oh yeah, I take a probiotic supplement. I'm like, okay, that's perfect. That's the best place to start. But if that's already where you're at, then maybe take a look deeper into maybe probiotic foods. I love probiotics, but the thing that I love about them the most is that they do actually prove and show that our insides are actually connected to how we think, how we act, how we portray everything about us. There's this vagus nerve that runs from our gut all the way up to the top of our brain. And that nerve gives messages constantly. Those messages come from what we're eating. So how you feed your body, the probiotics and the bacteria that are inside give messages that determine everything from our immune system, right? 70% of your immune system comes from your gut health. 90% of your serotonin levels come from your gut health. And so those two connections right there show and can help prevent so much anxiety that people feel, right? The loneliness and the confusion. And when I say confusion, I mean just kind of that lack of clarity, right? Sometimes we think, oh, I don't know what it is. They think there's always going to be one answer. And there's actually lots of different answers. But if I could pick one that would actually help you see results the fastest, it would be to take a look at your gut microbiome and start to introduce these probiotic foods. There's 3 that I really love. I mean, you can get a supplement, and supplements are great. One thing I try to teach though is that getting a supplement is it's like walking into Zara and grabbing the very first dress you see off the rack, not even trying it on, just grabbing it. Oh, it's on sale. Oh, this one's really expensive. Whatever you're drawn to, you just grab it and you run home and you think it's going to be the exact dress you need for a very special event. And more often than not, it does not work. You usually have to have it tailored, or you have to go and find a different size. Like buying a probiotic is kind of like that, right? We go to the store, we see them on the shelf. Oh, this one looks great. It's got 5 different strains of bacteria. Oh, it's got 50 billion CFUs. You're like, okay, this sounds great. This one's going to be great for me. But it's so hard to know because every single human is different. Our gut microbiome is totally different. Yours might be more similar to your children's because you live in the same environment, right? You and we've rubbed shoulders many times. Ours might share some common components, but everybody's is different for the most part. And so picking a probiotic is kind of just this guessing game because you don't actually know which one you're lacking. You don't know which one you have an abundance of. And so sometimes it's just this game of like, okay, well, I think this one's working. I feel like I go to the bathroom a little bit more. I feel some change. And yes, that's probably true. But if you want to prevent and just go right to the core, these probiotic foods, there's this trilogy of kefir and kombucha and cultured vegetables. Those will contain a full spectrum of probiotics that food has to offer. And I like to always go food first. Of course, I take so many supplements, right? There's tons. We could have a whole segment just on supplements, but those are the 3 that I go to. And I love them because you don't need to have a ton. You can have like a 1/4 cup of kombucha a couple times a week. 2 tablespoons of cultured vegetables, which would be like a sauerkraut or a kimchi, right? Kefir, you can start with as little as a 1/2 cup a day. And what people don't realize is these little tiny small increments actually create something bigger. And there it is again, another spiritual principle that applies to our health, that by small and simple means, big things come to pass. So that anxiety, everything from acne to, again, not being able to sleep, those afternoon crashes, all of that is dictated by your gut bacteria. And so by adding small little things, you start to create a really strong connection between that vagus nerve and your brain. And those messages become clearer and louder and better and more changing and full of light. And so I think that's one of the first things I would try to introduce someone to is rather than going and feeling like I have to totally revamp your diet, right? Or, start from scratch and do all these things. Take what you're already eating now and see, what can I add to this? Maybe I just put 2 tablespoons of kraut in the corner of my salad or on 1 bite of my sandwich. And I'm going to start with that. And that little bit's going to be just enough. But I promise over time, it starts to make a change. And that's just, on the first level of this internal health.
Ooh, so exciting. And you're probably the first nutritionist that anyone's talked to. I'm putting myself in the shoes of people hearing, like, you're probably the first that's ever said, start with probiotics,
Yes.
start internal.
Totally.
Which is why I wanted to bring you on. Because I was like, man, we sure attack things that are just symptoms or things at the outside. And that's probably why the healthcare industry is billions and billions of dollars that we pump into it. Because if it were working, we wouldn't keep putting money over and over and be repeat customers of the same messages over and over again. So first is hit those roots, the things that are internal, the things, and that's really your bedrock if everything's being pulled from the gut. So
just how you want to anchor yourself in a good foundation, we want to do the exact same thing with our health. And I think that that is going to be probiotics. And then there's components too, like prebiotics, which really are just colors of the earth. And we could go on and talk about that. But, you know, those are that probiotic component will start to make you a little bit more aware. And it's different. Everybody knows to eat more fruits and vegetables, right? So you can talk about that too. But I wanted to bring something that maybe people might not be doing. And when you mentioned that earlier about, you know, sometimes we don't think to start internally. That really is true for everybody. We actually always start with the external. So if you think about this trunk, right? Picture that tree again and visualizing that tree and that trunk. If I were to label some things that are held inside that trunk, it would be these external health methods like lifting weights, cardio, maybe some meal plans in here too, right? Intermittent fasting, water intake, all sorts of things like that initially affect our external health, our size, if you will, right? The number on the scale, the thing that we want to attack first. But it's interesting because people cycle inside, on and off that external part. They forget about the internal, and oftentimes we forget about that higher health part too. So this external health, they work, they're fine, but they're not lasting, right? They're not grounded in anything that will actually be able to make a change. It's kind of just that battle, like where we're kind of constantly, again, either on or off. How well am I doing? Am I on a diet? Am I off a diet? Am I on an exercise routine or am I off? And that's where I want to take a step back and look down internally and see and help people understand that when you do ground yourself in those internal roots, the external methods actually come faster and they become a lot more life-sustaining, right? They actually become and do what they're supposed to do versus just kind of affect the aesthetics part, right? That sometimes we think that's what our goal is. We think that's what we want is that smaller size or whatever it is for people. Like so many women, at least that I talk to, are just like, oh, if I could just drop 15 pounds, right? That last 15 pounds. And I'm like, okay, well, they think it's going to be a meal plan. They think it's going to be an exercise plan. I'm like, let's just look inside. And those are great and they will happen. And there are things we need to do for that as well, that will help so much. So we can't ignore them. But anyways, just something great to remember. Start at the right place.
Anything else you want to share on roots?
I love that part. I think it's the part that we have to remember just how a faith is a seed and it grows little by little, right? If you're someone that's starting and it's January and here we are ready to start some new health goals, your roots might be a little bit shallow and that is okay. It's new and we're just so happy the seed's planted, but to remember that over time, those get deeper and those get stronger, right? Just again, another spiritual principle, it's just like faith, like let it grow, let it practice. And to remember that consistency is what will actually bring that change, not quality or not even quantity when it comes to like, okay, I had one really good day or week of eating colorful foods and having my probiotics, right? I'm like, okay, that's amazing, but let's keep it consistent and let it grow and let it start small and then start to see how it can get bigger and better. So
I'm like picturing a root system that finds like the underground stream.
Oh,
and like, just keep them there.
Yes,
just
exactly.
Keep it coming.
Keep it coming. Stop. Yes. And be patient. Again, another spiritual principle of patience. It's the exact same way with our health. Like anything really worth having, anything really worth obtaining is not going to happen overnight. You'll go to the gym and you'll come home and be like, I don't see one bit of difference. Nothing changed for me today. But I promise in 4 to 6 weeks, you're going to be like, what? How did that happen? How did it happen before my eyes? It's a miracle. And it really is. It's the most beautiful concept. And that's why I think our bodies are so incredible because miracles happen every second inside our bodies of growth and life and light and giving and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, I get excited about it.
I love it. And we were joking. I was down where we're recording and Tanna came in upstairs and I was like, I can feel Tanna energies in the house. But it's true. Like you carry that light with you and you're like so fun to be around.
Oh, you're so sweet.
But it's deeper. It's like,
deeper.
you just carry that.
And it does like, again, those roots don't just happen overnight. Like as with you, like the things that you stand firm in, it took a little bit of watering and nourishing and planting and weeding and kind of plucking that out. So again, those principles apply to our health. So if you remember, that's how we're working on increasing our faith. That's exactly how we work on increasing our health.
So good. So, let's go to the trunk. You mentioned a few things there.
Yes, the
trunk. What do you want to emphasize? I know it's like, if we met with you one-on-one for months, then we would get it all out. But like, that's why you hire a nutritionist. But for what we can do today, what would you want to emphasize?
Oh, this trunk, like I said, these are some of my favorites. So not to think that I don't love lifting weights and meal plans. Like I don't want to overemphasize roots, although they're such a critical part. But this part is for me, kind of where you get to show a little bit more discipline, where you get to actually act. This is where you actually get to exercise that willing heart, right? That ability to kind of just dig in and endure. Because again, I told you, we will go to the gym one day and you'll be like, I don't feel indifferent after one day. But this is the part that I love because it really does show how much we trust the process, right? It shows how much we're willing to understand that, okay, this is a plan. There's something bigger than I can see right now. So stick with it all the way through, even when it gets hard, even when you feel like you have a craving, even when you don't have energy to go to the gym, stick with it, right? This is the part that I do love, that it gets to actually show and create a better version of ourselves. So in this kind of a thing, I think a lot of time, this is where people start with goal setting. It's one of the things we talked about for January. We set these goals of like, okay, I'm not going to have sugar and I'm going to go to the gym, 3 times a week, which are all wonderful goals. And we set goals. I love goals. I thrive off of goals. Like I just love it so much. But one of the things that I've learned that helps people better than understanding setting a goal and reaching it is this principle and concept of becoming. Again, another spiritual principle. But how are we becoming healthy in our nutrition methods, right? In our fitness methods. And so just a couple things, like right off the top of my head, I'm thinking, gosh, I have standards spiritually for myself or for my family. Like our family, I try to teach my kids, like we just don't see rated R movies, like people will, and that's okay. You can do what you want. But for some reason, the spirit has told me, teach your children to just keep a higher standard when viewing TV, right? Or movies. It's a standard that we have across the board, but that can also translate to standards in our health. For example, I have a standard that as often as I can, that is just regular for me. I will eat fruits and vegetables with every meal, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I just throw in a vegetable or I throw in a fruit or ideally both. It's a standard. It's a standard that allows me to become healthy in this process. So if you look at standards, like I have standards that I will always try to move my body a minimum of 3 times a week, minimum, right? Maximum maybe 5 or 6, but I just have these standards versus always trying to feel like I'm going to reach a goal or take it off, I'm again, on or off. No, we don't want to approach that way. We want to look at standards. I have standards that I will always pick a good night's quality sleep over exercise. So they're kind of in hierarchies. Like, how do you kind of know, where? And you just start with a few. And then if you set these standards, you start to become, and these standards usually apply to more of these external methods, these things that you're starting to work on every day, right? If I had to pick one, kind of just to simplify for the sake of this discussion and this awesome time to chat with you, I would say the one external method that I think will change people's health and mental state and longevity more than anything is creating lean muscle mass. This really becomes the fountain of youth. So if we think about it, over 40% of our body weight should be in muscle mass. And if you don't activate that and you don't strive to create it and keep it lean and strong, you're actually just carrying around kind of dead weight. But muscle mass on top of that, aside from just not carrying around dead weight, you actually are creating strength. You're creating a concept of anti-fragility, which is another beautiful concept that I love. If anyone hasn't read that book, Anti-Fragile.
So
my gosh.
Anti-Fragile.
Anti-Fragile. It really is
so
such a concept physically. Like I know that's a concept they talk about mentally, but when you think about growing lean muscle mass, it actually can't grow until it's ripped and shredded and dropped and broken and stressed and torn apart, literally. And that's sometimes how we are spiritually as well. Yep. Right? Again, another spiritual principle that so perfectly applies, and very literally too in creating lean muscle mass, because we go to the gym and when you feel that hot burn and it's like, okay, I'm going to try to do another set of 15, whatever it is, shoulder rows, biceps, squats, whatever it is. You're kind of like, I'm hot, I'm tired, but you feel the burn when you do it. in that burn, those little muscles are ripping open, tiny, tiny microscopic tears. And when they rip, that actually allows for them to get bigger and stronger and better. Better than not doing anything at all. Better than not just like we try to avoid the pain. We try to avoid the stress, right? But then we never grow. We never become a better version of ourselves. And that is so literal in our health when it comes to gaining lean muscle mass that it literally almost feels like it's a joke. I'm like, wait, really? Like this is how we actually get stronger and better. So I think that understanding that muscle actually is medicine, not only in the fact that of us holding it and carrying it, it allows us to prevent injuries. It allows for a stronger metabolic system. It allows for strength. It allows for longevity. But in the actual act of creating lean muscle mass, this is such a beautiful concept that I just loved learning about earlier this year, that when you actually contract a muscle, there is a protein released called BDNF, and that actually goes in and helps quicken and shorten neurotransmitter connections in your brain. So not only, again, like literally are we creating it, but then it's enhancing the mental capacity for our bodies and our brains to be better and hold more light. And so that to me was like a whole nother concept of like, wow, there's another beautiful plug. So if you're out there and wanting to know another great, start to these 3 levels of health, internally would be probiotics, externally it would be try to find a way, 15 minutes, even 15 minutes, right? 3 or 4 times a week to create that lean muscle mass, because that will carry you. That is the fountain of youth for your skin, for your brain, for your body, for the way that you react to situations, for how you handle stress. It all falls back on lean muscle mass. So I love it.
I can't wait for the day when we really understand what light is.
Oh,
and
right?
Can visualize it and see it, because it's gonna be so affirming to all of us who like feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you can measure it now.
So
that's why that
true.
person's so happy. That's why they emit. That's why they have the energy to serve. But I think when we think about health, we often just focus on the trunk. And then when you've been trying to fix the trunk for so long and you don't know that there's deeper things or higher things, you feel like, well, there must be something wrong with me.
Oh my gosh, Lizzy.
I am a failure because I've done all the things they said.
Yeah. And it's not working.
And it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to hear
that
the higher
so
things.
Profound. I know. Okay. Well, the last little part of our tree that we're visualizing, right, are these branches. And this is the part for me where I think it's missing in the nutrition world. If you were to name some of those branches up at the top, right, those branches that reach for the sun, I would put things on there like service and love, cleanliness, giving, right? Words that you don't really find in a nutrition book. And I've studied nutrition since college and continually try to get different certifications and master this concept. And whatever time I'm like looking for some of those words to see if we'll make those connections, sometimes they're missing, but that's okay. That may be the beautiful secret about your health, right? That we can just all unlock and find, because it'll be personal for everyone. Like clean and clutter free for me feels like that light, right? But for someone else, it might be, a quiet, still moment, even if it isn't a mess, whatever it looks like to people. This is the part where it allows for interpretation, for us to have our individual creativity. This is the part too, where if you again visualize this beautiful tree, the more light that it actually soaks up from external sources or from a higher divine source like God, Heavenly Father, right? More access to this influence of the Holy Spirit, it can continue to grow and nourish all of the areas, which I love that little symbolism, right? It helps the trunk. It also helps the roots, but it continues to spread higher and brighter and wider. So if you were to picture a tree with big, beautiful branches just reaching out, a tree like that capacity can actually gather people underneath it. It can protect it from elements. It's a safe, secure place. It's a refuge for people, whether it's in a community, right? However your influence is, or even just in your own home, even just for a spouse, even for a friend. When you have that ability, that structure, you're rooted and you're sturdy and you have a capacity for lengthening and growth, you actually become a better influence in your environment, right? And I love that concept so much about this higher health. I love that it's almost something you can't see, but you have to feel. It's this increase. It's this increase of looking for it, not knowing what actually it's going to feel like, but that when you keep those practices of the internal and the external health together, it's like this little surprise. And I think if I were to actually teach someone like, what's the one takeaway? How do you practice this higher health? I would for sure say across the board, and this comes from, 10 years of working with clients one-on-one, something that I wish some of my earlier clients, I have to apologize. I'm like, could you come back? Can we redo this? I'm so sorry. I've learned so many things, I think the one thing that I would help people to understand is to watch for the grace, because that is where the beauty shows up. We will try to do our best lifting weights and finding the probiotic foods, right? And try to do all that stuff. But again, we will fall short. It happens every time. And here I am loving nutrition and I live it as much as I can, but still every day I fall short. Somehow I grabbed a processed food, right? Somehow I grabbed another extra bar instead of an apple, whatever it looks like, right? But I have to promise and share this beautiful concept of grace. Watch for it, because grace is really what steps in and does the magic. It's not about perfection. And again, another spiritual principle. It's not about being perfect. It's not about living with no mistakes. It's about watching for the grace and the mercy to come in to make it whole, right? And I know that, I think in the scripture, you'll have to correct me, but when the scripture talks about be ye perfect, he's actually teaching us to be whole. WHOLE, right? Mm-hmm. So perfect doesn't mean without mistakes. Perfect means complete. And so I think that's the beauty of letting grace come in, is because it does make us complete. So it does make it so that all the mistakes we have, all the little, the imperfect ways that we've tried to execute our wellness routine, it's okay. It doesn't matter. Like people a lot of the times are like, oh, okay, well, which protein powder do you use? Because there's this ingredient in this, and oh, I had this cracker and it has this, seed oil or whatever it is. And yes, we're very aware of all those things. And it's so good to be educated. But I love this concept of grace because our bodies really are incredible. Like, do we trust the beauty that grace will come in? And so if we have, and it ties together, because if we do keep a internal health system clean with probiotics and helping our liver stay strong and our metabolic function stay strong, and then we have muscle mass to keep the structure, the grace physically actually can enter in through our bodies, because if your liver's strong, your liver can purge out any extra toxins or chemicals that we actually don't want, right? If you have lean muscle mass on your body and you have too much sugar, your lean muscle mass can absorb some of that extra insulin. So it doesn't even matter. It's not going to stick around. It's not going to make you gain weight. I mean, I can't tell you how many weekends I'm like, oh man, I had cookies and the pie. Oh, and then, whatever it is, you had a little bite of the candy. And I'm like, okay, if you're stressed about it and you think that this is going to actually pack on and add things, relax, because that's the beauty of sticking with these concepts and these principles, because the grace comes in and it very literally just wipes away any errors, right? Any imperfections. But it happens on a spiritual level, but it really actually does happen on a physical level as well, which is to me so incredible. It just makes me beyond grateful for this body that I'm in charge of. Like, it's something that I think is so connected to our spirit and to our future, that as far as like the entire plan of salvation, I think about, sometimes as I'm sitting in the temple and we listen to different things that talk about how incredible our bodies are. And if we take a minute to think about the connection of our bodies tied to those things, that higher and holier way of living. I mean, even towards that last little bit, as we enter in to talk about, to maybe be closest to God, what we really want, some of the things that God wants us to understand are: keep your body strong. Take care of it. There is joy in there. Come in and be with me. And that when we can do that and take care of our bodies, we then have created a greater capacity to hold light. It's not about the size, but it's about the capacity to hold more light. And I just love the symbolism and that is tied to both of it. So
beautiful. When you were talking about seeking that light at the top, I was like, I wonder how I'm going to feel about this, because I thought that would be the roots. Wouldn't your roots have to be the one? But thinking about that, if you don't, back to even my silly analogy with my kids this morning,
darling,
if you cut off the bottom half of the milk carton and I cut right through that cardboard and cut around the square, like, it has no capacity to hold it. So no matter how much I'm striving for with grace or with love or with good things that I feel, like you said, what in prayer or times in temples or whatever your faith practice is, listening in or nature, all of these things, if you have no bottom because there are no roots there, you can't hold it.
It's so true.
And I've learned from you with some of your awesome content on Instagram, like even these probiotics that impact your ability to feel happiness.
Oh, drastically.
And then it's like, if I'm always grabbing it, whether it's the light of God or the light of a friend, and I always need to call that friend to just lift me up because I can never quite pick myself up out of it, it's because it's slipping through me.
Yes.
There's no place to hold it.
Such a beautiful way to explain that.
So yeah, I need my roots first. My body does need this grounding.
Yeah.
And we can see that people who are like so on fire, and then they call you again and they're like, I'm just struggling again.
Oh, we all have that friend. Like, okay, well, what is it? Well, let's go back to the basics.
Yep.
Let's go back to your roots. Where are you? We can glean light from others and from above, and it can affect us. And actually, even sometimes you think about, is it so much that I can't even hold the capacity of it? Like you think about things like when we sunburn, or like when I have had a garden. Has anyone had a garden tried before? And I'm like, oh, I forgot to water it. The roots were not doing well. I burnt the sun in the middle of July, burned my squash. And now I'm like, have a little shriveled up. Like, not saying that you can have bad light, but that sometimes our body isn't able to understand how to hold it. And so that's what the greater purpose is. Then when we can hold it, you can share it so much better, which ultimately is the greatest gift, right? And it is the greatest connection to that higher power. And it just continues. Light attracts light, right? Food grown by the sun is grown by light. You literally put light inside your bodies too. So again, some of these same spiritual concepts also apply so physically,
So beautiful.
applicable. So
I also loved your comment about standards.
Oh.
And some people could argue that, well, this one isn't as bad as that one, thinking about the rating of a movie or thinking about, but the point of standards, yes, any one of those, it might be fine.
Yeah,
we don't
know.
But you have so many decisions you have to make a day. You have so much overload of should I or shouldn't I, or what's good or what's bad. A standard just makes life easier.
It's so true.
It's just easier if you're like, I don't do these certain things and I always do these certain things. Now, again, knowing that you may need a root system to be strong enough to keep a standard.
Yeah.
Start there.
Yes.
But then it's like, well, it's actually just easier.
It is. And you fall back to what your standard is. If you don't know what to do, well, what's my standard, right? If you have a good system in place for a little workout routine, a little experiment with probiotics, right? A little bit of watching for some of these things, you fall to the level of your systems as well. So I love thinking about standards and creating what works for you. But a system for Lizzy is a little bit different than a system for Tanna, right? So you get some freedom, you get some of that creativity, you get some of that divine spark that you're also allowed to play with. It's not a right or wrong way to live. Yes, there's going to be principles and standards we want to live by, but living a healthy life isn't one way, right? It isn't one exact particular meal plan that you have to follow, or whether it's a macro schedule or a specific diet like a keto that you want to follow. What is it inside you? What are you drawn to? Find that, explore it, create your standards, and just start to practice. And little by little, you do create this tree that then becomes a beautiful influence for so many people, and continues to, get you closer to the places you want to be in your life. So
and feel that joy and light and clarity. And okay, so for people who health is something they've been tackling in January, my guess is they probably set a goal that looked more like a trunk goal, like I want to lose the 10 pounds or the 15 pounds or whatever it is. And now they've listened in today, and they have a few more tools that they can hit.
Yeah.
If this is something they're choosing to tackle more and want to work with you, I know we already talked and your wait list is very long, but where can they find more if this is the thing they're going to tackle? How can they connect with you and learn more about this?
Thanks for asking. I think one of the things I love is teaching, but I have this deep little panic inside of me of okay, people that want to know, how do I reach out to them? And so I've been so grateful. And actually, this is so ironic sitting here, but one of the greatest blessings that has fallen into my life is this opportunity to be able to teach in big numbers. And so, yes, if we want to dive into this more, I teach 4 times a year a nutrition workshop. And it's a 6-week program that goes through every single one of these little things. And so I teach through Ampellis, and they have these workshops that we get to jump on, and there's an app and a workbook, and there's questions, and it's a live Zoom class where I get to just sit and teach. And I like to teach live because it's current. Like what I knew, in June is going to be totally different than what I know the following June. I have learned so much, and I'm so grateful for the things that I'm learning and the new science that comes out. So that's one of the greatest things that's been able to come into my life and my practice, is this platform to be able to teach through Ampellis workshops. And so again, I start on January 15th.
So when we launch this episode, there will be time to sign up for the 15th.
Yes, I hope so. Yes,
good.
Of course.
We'll do this the 1st of
yes.
January.
Oh my gosh, that would be so fun. And so anyone can come.
Okay.
And it really is. And if you can't make the live class, then they're recorded. And they're recorded. You can jump in and you can even text one-on-one for some of that one-on-one coaching and individual questions. I want everyone to feel like they can be empowered to do it. It's all on your own schedule, and it's kind of just there, and we'll keep a structure for you, but it's been so fun because I can reach so many more people that way. So that's probably the best way. And I try to do a tip every week. Sometimes they're really great and applicable to a lot of people. And sometimes they're really specific. I just try to follow whatever it is Heavenly Father's like, okay, Tan, or if it's something at the forefront of my mind, but I try to drop a tip every single week of something that will fall into one of those areas.
And that's on your Instagram.
And that's on my Instagram.
Live Right.
Yep. Live.right.nutrition.
Okay.
And I'm not like this great Instagrammer, but I certainly try. And so I just always am like, oh, I apologize sometimes, but I do answer questions, and I just want to be there for people and vice versa. And so, I think it's growing. I always learn something from every single person that I meet, right? Every single person that I talk or teach or whatever, there's always something to gain. There's always some light they can give me as well. So hopefully the feeling's mutual across the way.
It is, because you're so full of it, friend.
Oh, you're so
nice.
It's
so fun. So hopefully everyone has a few tips,
yeah.
But also if they want to dive deeper.
Yes.
But I love that you said what you said about pick one of these things you can do.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like little things go a long way. And think about that, like your cute little house plant in the corner. If you started watering it well and on the right cadence, and you learn more about that, or you moved it to a little sunnier spot, those little things do add up.
They do.
So don't, again, go to the full strict all or nothing. Am I on or off? And it's easier to think of adding things in the roots than taking away or having discipline. And if you haven't done the roots yet, you probably won't have the discipline. So don't start there where everybody else starts with nutrition.
That is so well summed up. It's exactly right. That's the perfect approach.
Okay. So we're going to link everything. People can find you on your Instagram.
Yes.
Hopefully can access those classes. If you're listening to that later, then every 4 months, the classes will reopen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, I try to do 4 times a year. Sometimes like the summer class last year, like never know, people want it in the summer or not, but 4 times a year, we're going to kind of just try to be fluid and see what works for majority.
So fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
I
have so many wonderful takeaways, and then I know this will just lead to more wonderful
Lizzy,
conversations.
You are the best.
Online.
What you do is so great and so full of its own light, and the way you lead and guide. And so it's such an honor to sit with you. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coming, Tanna.
So great.
Thank you so much for joining us today and for leaning into this powerful conversation with Tanna Fox. I hope you are walking away with this conversation with as many aha moments as I have, and real tangible ideas on what you can do right now to move towards living with greater health and more light. I know this is a topic that so many are struggling with right now in the beginning of January, so please do your friends a favor who are setting health goals and send on this episode. It's an honor to ring in 2025 with you. I hope this is your most courageous and confident year yet, and that you lean in more than you ever have to the life God has waiting for you. Do the bold thing, take the next step, and know that I'm cheering you on all along the way.